Hello and welcome to Top Story. It was only a few weeks back that the British media were congratulating Prime Minister David Cameron over a relatively smooth 100 first days in office. But it appears the honeymoon is well and truly over, with the Cameron government facing its first serious scandal since coming to power. It all centres around the Prime Minister's communications chief, Andy Coulson, who's the former editor of the Rupert Murdoch-owned News of the World. Coulson is expected to be questioned by London police over claims of phone hacking and, in particular, the hacking of parliamentarians' phone messages while he was editor. He strenuously denies all allegations but says he will talk to the police. Joining me from London to talk about this developing story and its implications is Sophie Lucien, a lecturer in British politics at the University of Sorbonne in Paris. She's also the author, I understand, of David Cameron, a Conservative of the 21st century. Sophie, thanks for joining us this morning. Let's go back about this story. Good morning. Let's talk about this story. This goes back to 2007 when Coulson resigned from News of the World as editor in the wake of a scandal which saw one of his journalists and an investigator apparently being found guilty of hacking the phone messages of aides to the royal family. He says he knew nothing about it, but of course we're getting new evidence that alleges the complete opposite, aren't we?
Yes, Andy Coulson was editor of the News of the World from 2003 to 2007, and when Goodman, the royal reporter of News of the World, and Mulcair, who was an investigator employed by the News of the World to get confidential information about celebrities, were jailed, Andy Coulson resigned from the News of the World. And that's when he became Director of Communications of the Conservative Party in May 2007. At the time, he denied...
But Sophie, given what's happened and given what's transpired and given what we know about all of this, why did Prime Minister Cameron employ Andy Coulson, given that this scandal was very much still there on the scene?
Well, the thing is that I think he appointed Andy Coulson Director of Communication of the Conservative Party in 2007 because he came from Rupert Murdoch's media empire. And at the time, Rupert Murdoch was supporting Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. And David Cameron wanted to have the support of Murdoch's media empire. And so he got The Sun and The Times supported David Cameron's campaign in 2010. So in a way, Andy Coulson was a great asset for the Conservative campaign.
But he was obviously very much aware, though, of this story, wasn't he?
Yes, he wanted to give Andy Coulson a second chance. And that's what he said in 2007. And in 2010, when he became Prime Minister, he appointed him to the top communication job in Number 10. He knew about his links with News of the World, about his culture of the dark arts, the way he employed investigators to find a story. And Andy Coulson has always been very good at finding a story, and he knows what the audience wants.
So, so far we haven't heard anything from Prime Minister Cameron. Is this the time for him to come forward and comment on this issue?
Well, I think so far Theresa May has commented upon it in the House of Commons when she was asked by Tom Watson, a Labour MP. But, you know, I think this scandal shows the rivalry between two media empires, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, News of the World and News International, and also the rivalry between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. Some Labour MPs are accusing, are mentioning that this scandal is like the British Watergate. I think it's far too much, and I think so far it just refers to a practice of London tabloids, which has been going on for decades. London tabloids, not only News of the World, have been employing investigators to find confidential information and to find a good story which would sell in the papers. And there is nothing new about it. But maybe there is an attempt.
But obviously it's still very damaging for this government, isn't it? You know, in terms of its implications.
Well, it's the first scandal which comes up in this government. It's true that it's trying to weaken the government at a time when it's in its honeymoon period. So far, David Cameron has been very successful putting forward his reform of education, his NHS reform, giving more power to the general practitioners, and also George Osborne has presented his austerity budget on the 22nd of June. So far, the Conservative Party and the coalition government is working very well. I think there is nothing new about this telephone hacking scandal. Scotland Yard didn't deal with it, and Alan Johnson even criticised the Scotland Yard for not dealing with it when he was Home Secretary.
But there have been questions raised over the nature of the relationship between the Metropolitan Police and News of the World and its slowness in order to investigate these claims, hasn't there?
Yes, well, I think right now Yates is going to investigate and there'll be an inquiry, and Andy Coulson has accepted to answer questions. So we have to follow what's going to appear in the next few days. But I think, you know, it may just vanish. And I think that the coalition government is very strong, and David Cameron and Nick Clegg are getting on very well, so it won't damage the coalition government.
But one thing it does say, as you talked about it, the dark arts of newsrooms and tabloid newspapers in Britain. Of course, the British media is seen among the Western world as a sort of role model for the freedom of expression. But these claims portray a very ugly side to all of that, don't they?
Yes, it does. And it shows that public figures cannot have a private life, because London tabloids have been covering politicians, the royal family, for decades, revealing their medical records, revealing their private lives. It's very difficult in Britain when you're in the limelight, to have a private life. Everything is known in the press, whereas in France, for instance, the press has a very different attitude to public figures, I think. This actually started in the United States at the end of the 19th century with the yellow press, and also at the beginning of the 20th century. So there is this Anglo-Saxon tradition of tabloids and revealing the private lives of public figures.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. I want to thank my guests for joining us. That's it for this edition of Top Story. Join us tomorrow for another program. Until then, goodbye.